Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to build the Tamiya 1/48 scale P-51B in natural metal finish, and really the point of this video is to highlight the effects you can achieve with an acrylic natural metal finish. I've been really experimenting in particular with Vallejo Metal Colors and seeing what kind of effects I can achieve using different techniques, and I wanted to highlight those for you in this video. So a couple things to note in this kit. There are some problem areas, and one of them is these protruding ejection marks that need to be removed. And I use a chisel, and then I come back in with a fiber pencil and get rid of them and smooth out the surface. In this case, the fiber pencil was not good enough, so I came in with a sanding sponge to smooth down the surface a little bit, and then I'll come in with the fiber pencil, and that will fix everything better. To get rid of any remaining imperfections and smooth out the surface, I'm going to use a little bit of Tamiya cement here. And the Tamiya brush isn't exactly the best for this, and it wasn't getting into the areas as I needed it to. So I switched over to a flat brush and loaded it with some cement, and then came back in and smoothed out the surface. And after this, you just need to let it dry for a little bit and you're good to go. Now that everything is ready, I'm going to go ahead and prime the cockpit, and I always recommend priming. I think it's very important. It gives the paint something to hold on to, it uniforms the surface, and helps you fix find any flaws that your eyeballs have missed. So as you can see, I'm adding in Badger primer here, and then I'm coming back in and airbrushing black on top of this. And I had to do 2 steps here. Unfortunately, I ran out of the black Badger primer. So that's why I'm doing 2 steps here. If I just use the black Badger primer, I would not have to do this extra step. Make sure to hit all of the small parts from different angles so you cover them correctly and don't miss a spot. For the interior color, I'm using Interior Green by Vallejo. I'm airbrushing it at 50/50 thinned with my thinner mixture formula, and airbrushing it at 18 psi with a 0.2mm needle nozzle setup. As you can see, I'm going light, gentle passes. I'm not trying to cover the black base because I want it to show through. I want to create this shadowy effect. For these smaller parts, make sure to airbrush them from different angles so you get everything, so the black isn't showing through completely or you miss a spot. Time to do some bleaching, and what I'm using here is zinc chromate yellow, heavily thinned at 70% thinner, 30% paint at 15 psi, and I'm aiming for the middle of the panels, and this creates like a bleached effect, and it looks exaggerated as you can see there, but it's a really nice effect. It's going to tone down a lot when we put on all our washes and other weathering we're planning to do here. So just hold on, but it's going to look really, really nice at the end of the day. It gives it a very nice effect. Be careful with thin paint. Thin paint is kind of dangerous. You can slip very, very quickly with thin paint and make a mistake. Right there, I made a mistake with thin paint. So I'm going to cover it up nice and gently, but be careful when you do this. Time to continue with the weathering of the cockpit. And this is becoming one of my favorite tools. It's a wet palette. It is perfect for brush painting. It really has changed everything for me. So here I'm mixing up a little bit of zinc chromate yellow and zinc chromate green to give me a little bit of a weird yellowish color. And I'm highlighting the ribs in the cockpit here. And I know this looks exaggerated, but again, once we do our washes, once we add in our flat coat, it will really tone things down. So don't worry too much about the exaggeration right now. It will tone down severely later on. But the wet palette for cockpit painting has become a game changer for me. It keeps the paint nice and wet and moist, perfect for brush painting, so you get nice strokes and no marks, etc. Highly recommend you pick one up. And with this paint mixture that I have going, I'm also aiming for all of the raised edges on the other parts of the cockpit. So anything protruding or raised, I'm going to hit it with this mixture. And you can also do some chipping using this method. So as you can see, I'm adding some chipping here and there towards the end of the bulkhead. I'm assuming the pilot feet would have touched this, so some chipping right there. I'm also going to add in some metallic chipping using a metallic pencil. Nothing too extreme. My understanding is the RAF P-51Bs were not that much used, so they weren't as dirty and weathered down as other Mustangs were. I could be wrong, but that's what I found. And I'm going to use metallic paint here to simulate worn paint and metal showing through on the bottom, because this area the pilot is touching a lot, and so paint would have scraped away. Same with the pedals here. Lastly, I'm going to add in some dirt using pigments. I like this effect. It makes it look a little dirty. Boots aren't clean. The pilots aren't on runways, they're in fields, so mud's going to get carried on, and you know, the cockpit is going to get a little muddy. Time to glue the fuselage halves together. And as you can see, I'm using two different kinds of cement. I'm using testers, and I'm using testers on the main body portion, and it's because it gives you a very strong bond, and that's what I want. But for the thinner areas like the tail, you don't want to use testers because it's so strong it might melt that and distort that tail. So I'm not going to use testers there. I'm going to use the Tamiya cement. It's a little bit not as destructive on those type of smaller parts, the thinner parts. I'm going to use a brush and add in a little bit of layer of liquid cement. Then I'm going to bring the parts together and use clamps to hold everything. And by doing it this way, I notice that majority of the time I don't have seams because this allows the glue to bond everything together very tightly and reduce the potential of a seam. I go around the outside of the seam with further liquid glue just to close up all of the seams. And I find this way it really reduces my work on fixing and filling seams. Murphy's Law anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and unfortunately that's what happened to me in this video. I lost all my footage of the natural metal finish airbrushing portion, and so instead I'm going to talk about the natural metal finish and then do a test piece to demonstrate how you can achieve the results I did. As I mentioned earlier, the goal of this video was to highlight the effects you can achieve with acrylics for a natural metal finish. In particular, I'm using Vallejo Metal Colors, and I chose two colors, aluminum and chrome. I should mention that both these colors are very nice, but they're never going to be as shiny as enamel or lacquer. So if you're going for a really high shine kit or model, it's not going to work. But they're really nice. They give a very beautiful look, in my opinion, of a used aluminum, slightly used aluminum, rather than a high shine aluminum looking airplane. The chrome, yes, it's chrome, but it's really not a true chrome, so it's more like a polished aluminum look if you put it on a particular gloss background or primer. So as you can see, the best results in my opinion are with the gloss primers. It doesn't matter if it was a gray or black, those were the best. The white wasn't as great, although if you want to use it for RAF high-speed silver, I think it looks really nice for that particular look. I decided to go with the gray gloss primer and spray aluminum over it. I think it's a really nice look. It's an airplane that's shiny but not too shiny, so it's a little slightly used aluminum look, and I thought it would look very good. In retrospect, if I did this all again, I would probably use the gloss gray primer, but I would go with the chrome because it just has a little bit more of a shine that seems to resemble the RAF birds. The shine on the aluminum was toned down significantly by the weathering wash. So in retrospect, I would have probably go with the chrome over the gray primer, gloss gray primer, than the aluminum. Time for the test piece demonstration. As you can see, I'm using the gray primer. As I mentioned earlier, I really like the gloss gray aluminum on top of it, and I'm using Badger Stynel Res, thinned 30% with my thinner mixture, and this makes the Badger primer airbrush smoother and leaves a nice smooth, almost satin-like finish on the primer. So I would really recommend trying this at 25 psi. Next, I'm going to smooth out the primer by sanding it with 8000 grit sandpaper. You want a really nice smooth finish to your piece when you do natural metal finish. And I'm adding my gloss coat. Now, my gloss coat, I'm using Future. I've also tested it with Tamiya X22, and that works well. So if you don't have Future, you can use that. You can use whatever type of gloss coat you want, really, but do remember in a previous video I showed you that different glosses don't have the same level of shininess. So pick one that you like. And then let it dry for a good solid hour at least. So here's the piece dried with the gloss coat, and I'm going to come in with aluminum and thin it 50-50, and I'm spraying at 10 psi here. I'm doing very light misty coats. You don't want to blast on a metal color because it's going to ruin the effect. So you want to mist it on, build up the effect. As you can see, it's starting to get shiny, starting to get that really bright aluminum look, and that's going to tone down a lot by the time we're done with this. Here you can see the model painted completely in the natural metal finish, and it's got a nice look to it. It's not super shiny, but it's got a nice aluminum look to it. Okay, time for the decals, and these were some of the worst decals I've ever used in my entire life. They were horrendous. So as you notice, I'm putting them into boiling hot water. I don't know if you can see the steam. That's what you have to do with these decals. And one thing I should note, before I went on to the decaling process, I airbrushed a layer of gauzy agent, and that is my favorite gloss coat for metallizer paints. As you notice, it protects the paint but hasn't reduced the shininess of the paint. So as you can see, I put the decals on. They're incredibly thick and they will not conform. So I have a bottle of Microset, which is the blue bottle right there, and I'm gonna add in about a good 9-10 coats in an hour period to get them to conform before moving on to Microsol to get them to fit in and conform fully. These were just terrible, and I also had to cut them a little bit just to get them to conform. Just horrendous details, really bad. Time for the weathering wash, and this is where I screwed up. I used Ultimate Weathering Products wash here, which is a really nice clay wash. Unfortunately, the wash really reduced the shininess of the kit at the end, and I wish in retrospect I'd done a pen wash instead of an overall wash like this, because of that reduction in shininess. So the kit looks a little bit more duller, although on pictures you can't see it, but it does have a little bit dullness to it compared to how I started with a nicer, shinier metal look. So when I do this again in the future, definitely a pen wash and not a general overall wash. Okay, so we're almost at the final stages of this kit here, and I am painting the white on the wings here because on the kit they are yellow. I don't know why they're yellow, but they are. And to paint yellow on metal finishes, you're going to have to come in with a white first, or what's going to happen is the yellow is going to look like a metallic yellow and not a flat type of yellow. So here I'm airbrushing at about 15 psi, and my mixture paint ratio is 60% mixture, 40% paint, and this lets me control the paint very nicely, and this way I'm not too worried about overspray because I have really good fine control of the paint right now. Time to paint the anti-glare panel on the nose here, and I'm using olive drab as the color, and I've thinned it 60% thinner to 40% paint at 15 psi. And again, I'm going in very small areas and building up the paint. And with any paint over metallic, you have to build it up or it's gonna look like a metallic sheen type of paint and not a flat paint. So I'm gonna build this up and then I'm gonna do a little bit of weathering on it just to give it a little bit of life. Time to weather the anti-glare panel, and I'm using yellow zinc chromate, heavily thinned at 70% thinner, 30% paint, and just kind of coming in here and bleaching out the olive drab. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with olive drab and kind of start blending it in, but not fully. I want it to have a weathered used look to the anti-glare panel, and as you can see, as I build it up, that yellow zinc chromate starts to disappear, but you have this kind of faded, bleached look, and it looks a little bit worn and used but not overdone, and that's what I really like about this. Okay, time to add in my flat coat, and I prefer the Vallejo polyurethane matte flat coat. It's my favorite flat coat. I think it's a really nice flat coat because it's not a dead flat, and I'm airbrushing it at 50% matte with 50% thinners, and it airbrushes really beautifully at about 15 to 18 psi. A few layers and you're good to go. Again, not a dead flat, so if you're looking for a dead flat, not the one for you, but it's a really nice flat. The last bit of weathering is some chipping to the painted areas. The flat coat is dry, and I can come in with my pencil here and add in a little bit of scratches here and there. And as you can see, I've already done that, but it looks really nice. You can also do it on the wing as well to show some rocks being hit, etc. Just a nice little effect.